I turn to a rare moment of bipartisanship in our nation's capital, dealing with these things: semiconductors, computer chips. Today, the U.S. Senate passed a bill that spends tens of billions of dollars to encourage high-tech manufacturing of those chips right here in America. The latest numbers show that only about 12% of the chips that we need and use are produced here. The rest of them in China and a few other countries. The legislation that was approved today will give federal incentives for private companies to bring the manufacturing back here. And Senator Charles Schumer says our region specifically will benefit.
Grandchildren of every resident of upstate New York will have an opportunity for a really good paying job because of these investments. And I wrote this bill with the future of upstate New York in mind. The bill creates $50 billion in federal incentives to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to the U.S. And guess what place in America is most suited to get these plants? Upstate New York.
And specifically, Schumer says that this bill will immediately help bring jobs to the shovel-ready site at the stamp manufacturing facility in Genesee County. We've talked about that a lot lately. Joining us live right now with some insight is Jerry Zremski. He is the longtime Washington, D.C. bureau chief for the Buffalo News. He is now, though, a college journalism professor, lecturer, but he continues to report part-time from the nation's capital. Jerry, always great to have you on. And I get kind of a very brief overview of this bill there. I know there are a lot of specifics in it. So before we kind of get into the local impact and some of what Schumer said there, as you see it, how big a deal is this bill, and what else is important that we know about it?
Well, I think this bill is very important because it's really the first attempt that I've seen for Congress to try to onshore an absolutely major and critical industry. And if you think about this industry and the impact it's had, if you look around our economy in the last year, you're going to see that impact. If you might have wanted to buy a new car, you might not have been able to get the model you want. Why? Because there's a chip shortage. You might be trying to buy other consumer goods, electronics. Why can't you get them? Because of a chip shortage. Why is that? Because so much of our chip manufacturing over time has gone overseas. Much of it now is actually in Taiwan. And what's happened, of course, with the COVID pandemic is that manufacturing and that flow of products into the factories that need those chips has just not been occurring the way it has before. And it really poses almost a long-term security threat, too, if you think about it, because if China were to invade Taiwan, which produces so many of these chips, so much of what's produced could end up being shut down. So it's kind of a national security measure, too. And so this has been a bill that's been in the works for about 2 years. It's been talked about a lot. There were a lot of issues in the House with it, with some progressives wanting other provisions added to it. But in the end, what it does is it makes an attempt that will take some time. It'll take years. But it's an attempt to bring these jobs back and make sure that American manufacturing is strong and is able to produce the products that the American people want.
You make such a good point that so many of us have been so directly impacted by the fact that we don't make enough of these. But I want to ask you also about Senator Schumer's comments there, because he's not just saying this is good for the United States, this is good for the country. He's saying that upstate New York is the best suited place in the entire country to benefit from this. Is that accurate? And how should we kind of look at this from the local perspective?
I would say that it's really going to be up to industry to decide where the best place to locate these facilities are. And industry may not view everything quite the same way as Senator Schumer. However, there are elements of what we have here in upstate New York that really should benefit us. The stamp facility, for one, is pretty much ready to go, ready to be a facility. It doesn't have to be built. It's there. With all the nanotech stuff around the Albany area, that's also a very appealing thing, one would think. Now, of course, we're going to have to see what companies do. They may balance that against some of the other issues that always face anyone trying to bring economic development into New York State, namely our tax structure, our state tax structure. So I'm not going to disagree with what the senator said, but I don't think it's really his decision in the end. I think it's independent industry's decision.
I've got less than a minute left, Jerry, but I want to ask you about what happens next. So this passed in the Senate. You mentioned this has been going on for a couple of years now. Democrats control the House. So is this going to go to the House and pass quickly, you think, and go to the president?
Yes, it's going to go to the House. Nancy Pelosi has said that she has the votes for this particular measure at this point in time. So if it doesn't pass in the next week or so before the August recess, I'm sure it would be one of the first things to pass in September.
Good to know. Jerry Zremski is a lecturer in the College of Journalism at the University of Maryland. A new gig for you. Congratulations with that. And also a part-time reporter still for the Buffalo News covering our nation's capital. Always great to see you, Jerry. Thank you.
Great to see you, Michael. Thanks.